Hey, welcome back to Bitcoin Reformation Podcast. I'm Ben Haupt, joined by my friends David. What the heck? Joined by my good friends David Rufner and Jared Townley. I almost said David Townley and Jared Rufner.
Oh, there you go.
Oh man, good to be with you guys today, and glad just to have time to continue our friendship. If nothing else, this podcast is fun for the three of us just to catch up with each other and to continue the conversation. We just talked for 45 minutes before we started recording because we just like hanging out with each other and talking about life and everything under the sun. So, yeah, great to be with you guys. Jared, what's new in your neck of the woods?
Right. Well, the better question is what is almost new in my neck of the woods? So we are now 10 days away for little baby Townley. David, I'm sorry, we're not going to name him David, though. So, Ben, your prophecy won't become fulfilled. So we did a hospital tour last night, and boy, did the reality just sink in. Walking around, seeing labor delivery rooms, seeing postpartum rooms. It is so real that there is going to be a tiny human around our house again. And what does that mean? Entering, the hottest months of the year here where I live, and temperatures don't get below 90 at night, and, all those sort of things. So it's an awkward thing, as you know, if you've been this way. You try and continue to just live life as though everything is normal, while also planning and preparing to just drop everything and leave at a moment's notice, and then hope that what you were working on continued to grow and do its thing even though you weren't there. So trying to get things in place. Worked ahead last weekend, wrote a bunch of worship services, so we should be set for a couple of weeks. Just trying to get my ducks in a row. So with all that being said, though, the family is good and great. We had a great day yesterday together, just hanging out, spending time together. I mean, my kids, they're just growing. They're growing so fast, too. I mean, that's the craziest part. So Silas he'll be 2 next month, and he's just so outgoing now almost. Like he's demanding. He used to be the one, I think I've said this, sit. But now he will tell you, like, read, sit there. He will tell you when he wants you to play with him and when to stop. So stop, or watch. He's already learned as a 2-year-old that he wants you to watch him play, which is really cool. And Zoe is finishing up her preschool today, is her last day of school. And it's just, there's so many things. It's like hard to even, I don't even know how to summarize or tell a story, but just that there is a lot going on in my life, in my world. And so I think I'll say it this way, Ben, that just like you did, I'm just kind of glad to be here, and not to put it all aside, but to just be in a different space, in a different environment, if you will, even for whether it's 45 minutes or a couple hours. I'm grateful to be here with you guys and with those of you that are listening too. It's a good space for me and for the various parts of my brain that aren't church or family. So I appreciate you both for that reason. David, what's going on in your neck of the woods?
Well, I gotta say, I'm excited for you. I'm so pleased about where my family has come to, the ages, but I've said it before, I can't help but not hurry ahead, but think only a few years ahead when, Lord willing, my own children, as they're growing, will meet their spouse and have kids. I'm hungry to hold some babies in my arms. It doesn't look like they'll be our own anymore, but so I'm excited for that. We got 2 boys back from college, maybe since the last time we were together. It's funny, I have 2 months time. We have 2 months time without any tuition payments, and I thought we would be, like Scrooge McDuck rolling in the bills on the bed. And right now, my wife and I, like, our breath is taken away at how much food is being eaten in our house. Last night, she made a triple recipe of chicken stir fry, new recipe. We will be repeating this recipe. It was great. One recipe is supposed to feed 4 people. There's 6 of us. She did a triple recipe. There was nothing left. And the boys were going to the refrigerator looking for leftovers.
Oh my goodness.
So it's kind of outrageous right now what's happening with food in the house, but it's it's signs of life, I guess you can say it that way. And so it's a lot of fun. Apart from that, I'll tell you, I live in the high desert here at 6,000 plus feet. High desert. I'll tell you, I think everybody should live in some high desert sometime. And then everybody should live like in the Midwest where things are lush, because you could read different portions of scripture and like understand them then. There's plenty of Old Testament texts about streams of living water and what a delight that is. So this spring is drier. Our one spring our creek that normally runs with water for about 2 weeks time, coming off Sugarloaf Mountain, none this year, but we keep hiking, looking for the water, but what we catch is the wildflowers. And it's been fun year after year. Our eyes get tuned to the next wildflower, to the next one. And you really have to be tuned for them. You have to look for them, because it's not like the Midwest where we come from, but we've loved it. We're up to the task. We're loving it. And we literally now watch the cadence of flowers through the woods at different heights, different elevations, different slopes, different weeks and even months now through the end of summer. So that's a lot of fun. So come on out, hike with us sometime, and we'll go find the next set of wildflowers that are out. And I realize I'm sounding pretty old. So I'm like an old man likes flowers is what it sounded like to me.
Going out to smell the flowers in your garden.
This is definitely middle-aged David Rufner and not young man David Rufner. So there you go.
Hey, but I think you redeemed yourself by saying, hey, I'm hiking to get there, right? So this is not like asphalt path, right? This is a real hike. So there you go.
That's right.
You're not old man David yet.
In fact, on the year, I'm getting ready to tip over 500 miles of hiking. So that's
nicely done.
Quite a bit every day. Yeah.
That's
there you
awesome.
go. That's what's up with us.
2025 so far?
Just for 2025 so far. Ben, amazing. How about you?
Yeah, I'm great. Lots of different things going on at the house. This week we have our son graduates from high school, and so Jared, while you're anticipating little one being born, we're seeing our first graduate from high school, and that's just another major milestone. Really a good season though of life. I mean, we have some of the teenage drama, but there's not a lot of it. I would say for us, having teenagers has been pretty easy. I miss hugs and I miss story time and some of those more, sweet times. But on the other hand, man, last night we've had tornadoes here in St. Louis. Last week we had this big EF3, and it did significant damage across the city. It impacted kids' schools. My wife and my younger son both still were out of school today because the power still isn't back on in their schools. And then last night we had another storm come through, and we were all up from 11:15 when the tornado siren went off until about midnight. And Jared, I will just say, I think I'm too old to be doing this kind of getting up in the middle of the night and being up with the baby. So God has a reason for why younger people,
another old man
get babies. And not
I don't know though, because a couple nights ago I was up from like 2 to 3, just couldn't fall back asleep, and it was like, I'm not ready for this, man. I can't. This is just like for 45 minutes. This is not talking like 2 or 3 times over the course of the night. So I don't know. You might say that it's good for young people, but I am 32 now, so I'm getting there, and I already feel like I'm feeling that I need my 8 hours of sleep without disturbance through the rest of the night. So we're in for it. That's for sure. But can I say one more thing before we go anywhere else? So I'm also playing the Bitcoin conference lottery. So part of my heart is that our baby would come as soon as Emily's mom gets here on Friday, so that then she can be here with us the longest. But part of my heart is also that the baby would come after the Bitcoin conference so that I can actually go to it. So I got free tickets through Tuttle Twins, and shout out to Tuttle Twins. Great channel. You should go check them out. But I really would like to go because I think it'd be really fun. David, I'm really sad that if I'm not going to be able to go, that you couldn't have come with me, if that makes sense at all.
Truly. Will you keep me posted about those tickets? That's
So
next week?
Yeah, it's next week. Next, I think the free tickets were the 27th and 28th, or the 28th and the 29th. I can't remember which one. But it made me think we need to produce, and I meant to do this at Christmas time. Maybe I'll do it this year. We need to make like a T-shirt with our logo on it, and then we can print them and give them to you and your family, and you can ask our listener if they like one, and they can wear them and all those sort of things. So maybe someday in the future we'll have some Bitcoin Reformation swag to give to people and hand out so that they can spread the news about this crazy group that we are. Anyway, so then let's transition to what we're talking about today. So this is a episode thanks to shout out Brian Boshin. If you're listening, this is your doing. We blame you. You are responsible for this.
We blame you.
So I hope this isn't giving too much away. So Brian had just sent me a general text asking about buying Bitcoin. And so I had responded with him sort of a 3 different option thing, right? So we've talked on this show a couple episodes ago about where to buy it. And I think we pointed most people to things like Strike. I think we talked about Unchained a little bit there. We talked about Coinbase too. And we just maybe referenced ETFs, so exchange traded funds, things that you could buy on a brokerage account. And I had sent him those sort of things. And he said, hey, you've not really done much about that. And I didn't want to say, yes, we did. You just weren't listening. But I think,
Brian,
I think the right way to say that is to say we could explore that topic more genuinely and more broadly speaking. So today, our goal is to try and maybe paint a much more deeper picture into those 2 different silos of, hey, not that this is financial advice, not that this is professional opinion, but this is just us 3 guys who have been in Bitcoin for a while. Here's what we think about: should you buy Bitcoin itself, Bitcoin the bearer asset, on an exchange like Coinbase or River? That was the other one we talked about. Or should you buy an ETF, and sort of why you might want to go one way or the other, some of the fees that might be around that, some of the long-term potential for that, various different types of accounts. And so I think I'd like us to sort of structure our conversation around those 2 simple questions. Why would someone want to buy Bitcoin, the asset itself? And then why might someone want to buy an ETF? And so let's actually start with Bitcoin, the asset itself, and take that up. Why might we want to buy Bitcoin itself? So I'm going to toss it to you guys. How would you answer that question? Why should I, listener, buy the actual thing and take custody of it myself, do all that sort of stuff? What's the pros or the reason why we might want to do that?
Well, sometimes choice is nice and sometimes it's crippling, right? Like you go to that restaurant and the menu's just that Greek restaurant, right? It's like that menu goes on and on. You're like, what shall I get? So yeah, choice can be crippling. But I'll say this to begin with: I bought Bitcoin, the asset, to begin with because at the time there really wasn't anything else to buy. So to even be talking about ETFs, that's new in the last less than a year and a half. I'm going to call it 15, 16 months. That's new. So that goes to BlackRock, particularly. Others had tried it. Gemini, the Winklevoss twins of Facebook fame, have been trying for over a decade to get the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, to allow for Bitcoin ETFs. Nothing. And then BlackRock comes along, which has over, I think, $11 trillion, not just under management, but $11 trillion in custody for folks. I mean, they're the world's largest single financial institution, 11 trillion. And is it Larry Fink at BlackRock? I think it is. Larry Fink comes along, and he and BlackRock submitted this ETF filing to the SEC. And here's the thing. I'll get the numbers wrong, but you'll get the gist. They had, prior to this point, filed 650 some ETF filings with them. All but one had been accepted in their history. So, which is to say, he only likes to step up to the plate when he knows he can get it over the wall in deep center, right? To use a sports analogy. So Larry Fink gets up, they file this. The whole market then paid attention and said, "Oh, we think these exchange traded funds are going to come." So first of all, they're new. When all of us started, they weren't available. But yes, dear hearer, if you're getting into Bitcoin now, you do have choices. Maybe that's also kind of underlying where we start. You have choices. Choices can be helpful. Choices can be crippling. We're going to try and talk them through with you in a way that maybe it'd be helpful to you. But I started buying it just because that was the only thing to buy, the digital bearer asset. My question tree went like this: do I leave it on exchange or do I take personal custody of it? Okay. That's still kind of a subset of questions for the person who would buy the digital bearer asset. Why ETFs? What's nice about ETFs is a lot of your brokerages have access to them, and it's just a different flavor of something they already give exposure to, as opposed to figuring out how to give exposure to a new product. So there's literally hundreds and thousands of ETFs out there. Every Fidelity, Schwab, all of these, your average IRA where you can buy into ETFs has exposure to them. A lot of 401ks do. I've been finding out 403bs, which is typically the nonprofit 401k, a much smaller group of assets that are available there. But why do it? Now, my simple answer to it, I'll do this and then I'll punt it off to others since I'm taking up too much of the oxygen in the room with all my talking, is do you want that? Do you want the real digital bearer asset yourself, where you're like, I'm kind of a sovereign individual. I want to take real responsibility, even would be the word. I wanted to say control, but I like responsibility more. Take real responsibility for the things I have, the things I purchase. I don't want to trust somebody else. I want to trust fewer people in my life. Why is that? Because trusting other people introduces, and this is a common economics phrase, counterparty risk. I'm trusting them, but they could break trust with me, right? And they're a counterparty. They're a second party. They're not me, myself, or my family. And so I'm accepting some level of risk, whatever that risk be, however small or large, maybe even incredibly small, but still real. Anything greater than zero is still real, right? Even if it's less than one, I'm accepting counterparty risk with something like an ETF. Whereas with buying digital bearer asset BTC, and then I'm just going to make the leap, taking it off exchanges into some form of private custody. Even that, there's different variations of that. Is the difference between am I sort of like prepping where I'm the sovereign individual, I'm taking responsibility, or am I still good at trusting reputable institutions? BlackRock, for instance, think it's $11 trillion assets under management by being trustless, an untrustworthy institution. Trust is a hallmark of part. That's really maybe their second product, right along with any financial product they give, is trust. Don't break trust. So that's my quick framework, and I'm going to hand it over to Ben. Do you want to hold the thing yourself, or is that too much and you'd like to kind of, like much of your other portions of life, have the bank essentially hold it for you and get quicker access to it without having to go into a whole new asset class?
Yeah, that's great. So I'll just tell a little bit about my experience and share a couple stories that led me to make some decisions. So yeah, I got into Bitcoin, and I think started to think about, wouldn't it be nice to have some Bitcoin that I didn't have to pay capital gains tax on, which you can get that by holding an investment in a Roth IRA. You can't access it until you're 59 and a half, but it grows, all the interest, all the principal, there's no capital gains because it's money that you're using after you've paid your income tax and all that kind of stuff. So I was very interested. After I got into Bitcoin, I started getting into this idea of like, wouldn't it be cool if I had some Bitcoin that I could eventually sell someday, and I wouldn't have to pay the federal government a whole bunch of money for my gains. So the first thing that I got really interested in, started paying attention to, this is long before ETFs came along, long before MicroStrategy was a thing, and you could, or even Bitcoin miners that had gone public so that you could somehow buy a stock that has, as they call it, picks and shovels. So in the gold world, if you couldn't buy gold in your Roth, you'd buy a gold miner as kind of a way to be exposed to the asset. Long before all those things, the thing that first kind of came about, and it was partially due to the Winklevoss twins, the Winklev, they and Barry Silbert start this thing called Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. And their idea was they were going to buy Bitcoin and then sell essentially shares of their company, Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. The problem with it was, well, they weren't regulated. And so they were kind of moving fast and loose. They only would allow people to invest in that if you were a certified investor, which I think means that you have to make over, I think, $500,000 a year or have X number of $1 million already in your bank account before you can. I'm not that. So I couldn't invest in the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, but I kind of watched it because I thought, man, wouldn't that be a cool way to buy it in my Roth IRA and then not have to pay federal income tax on the capital gains? Well, here's maybe one reason that I get a little nervous about ETFs is that Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, they got out over their skis, right? The trust started trending down in cost, but they were claiming that they still had all this Bitcoin, and there was a lot of back and forth about deals that were going on behind the scenes, and all of a sudden Grayscale Bitcoin Trust and Gemini start having notices due for deals that they had made, and Grayscale Bitcoin Trust unravels, kind of like FTX and all the rest of it. I'm continue to be very nervous about companies that say, trust us. BlackRock has a pretty good reputation, but yet they are a company that are essentially saying, trust us. We'll take care of this for you. I've seen too many companies that have said, trust us, we know how Bitcoin works, and then they lose control of it, and all of a sudden they're bankrupt. And when a place like Grayscale goes bankrupt, you just lose your entire asset. You lose your entire investment. So I went a different route. This Roth IRA product from Unchained.com came about before the ETFs, I will say. But they work with a regular bank, and it's all certified, it's all regulated. The way that it works is you send them money through a wire transfer from your bank to their bank, specifically for a Roth IRA investment. When they get it, then they buy however much Bitcoin the amount is on that exchange day, and then Unchained helps you to set up a multi-sig wallet. So there's basically 3 devices. Unchained has one of the devices that can certify that Bitcoin is being held in my name, but I have 2 devices kept in separate places. And I have control, or I at least know that Bitcoin is in my custody. If Unchained would ever go bankrupt, you have to have 2 of 3 devices to move the Bitcoin. So Unchained can't take my Bitcoin away from me. If Unchained would ever go bankrupt, I am the sole bearer of the Bitcoin. The problem is that there was a law that was passed back when gold was a thing, when people could own gold, that people wanted to say, well, United States government or banks or whatever, I don't trust you to hold my gold. I want to hold my gold myself in my own safe. And the law was passed that said individuals cannot do that. You cannot, because the government then has no idea of, do you really still have that gold? Do you just say you have that gold, right? Is it just paper gold? So the U.S. government essentially requires there to be the bank that's holding your asset to be able to confirm that asset is still there. If, for example, I took my 2 devices and I got my Bitcoin away from Unchained, it would no longer be in that protected Roth IRA. I would have my Bitcoin, but then I would be, if I sold it, the government would know to come looking for me because they know exactly how much Bitcoin I have. So I just keep it in Unchained. I have an app that shows me that, yep, it's still there. Nobody can move it without my permission. And when I'm 59 and a half, it will be there. And I will then be able to sell it and not pay capital gains on it. So for me, Unchained has worked well. There is one downside, and I'll let Jared talk a little bit about this, but there are some fees involved because I'm essentially paying for the right to have Bitcoin self-custodied in a Roth IRA, and there are costs to that. So there is some downside, and I'll let Jared make the case for why maybe ETFs might be interesting for other people.
I want to add one more thing before we go there, though. So, David, you say, hey, you want to buy Bitcoin itself, the actual asset, if you want to hold it yourself, right? If you're interested in being responsible in that way, not trusting somewhere else. I couldn't find the post on X, but the recent article I saw said that says Coinbase has 2.727 Bitcoin, about 10% of total Bitcoin supply in its custody. And so most people would say that that's a pretty large honeypot, right? If you can hack your way into that and somehow get to that, that's a lot of Bitcoin for you to have or do something with anyway. So there's the aspect of trusting someone else. Ben, I hear you too. I've seen companies who say they're going to do these things, not do them well. And so I don't want to take that chance. I don't want to take that risk. Is maybe BlackRock different than, Grayscale? I would say so, right? But at the same time, it still is just a organization run by humans. And like we've talked about here on the show, we can't create a trustless society, but a trust minimized way to hold and to have our Bitcoin too. And I think the last thing I would say, why would you want to buy it yourself? And I think this, David, is what you were saying before we started. Well, you might want to buy it yourself in case of 2 reasons. One, Bitcoin ever does become some sort of currency that we use on a regular basis. So just recently, it was used or is used now by Steak and Shake. And you can go to Steak and Shake and buy a burger and a shake not with fries, with your Bitcoin, which is, it's cool, I guess. We'll see how long they do it and if it sort of flops and whatnot. But you can actually spend Bitcoin to buy something in a real life, real world way today. But then I also think that the other example that we talked about just a couple episodes ago, that, hey, if you need to sell this now, sure, you can do that with an ETF, but ETFs are usually only traded during trading hours, Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30 or whatever it, or not whatever it is, 9:30 to 4:30, whereas Bitcoin is liquid 24/7, 365. And so if you have a place where you need money now, you're going to be able to get US dollars from your Bitcoin faster if you're actually holding the asset itself if you're self-custody, once you send it to an exchange. So I would say that would be the other reason why, hey, if I'm really concerned about this being liquid, it's not in a Roth, obviously, but something that I'm holding and I need to cash out of, Bitcoin itself is going to be the most liquid way for you to do that versus an ETF. Yeah, go ahead, David.
And real quickly, I just looked it up to prematurely take out of a Roth IRA. So Roth is taking your after-tax dollars and investing it, so it's not taxed down the line. Since the investment was taxed up front, it won't be taxed later. But nevertheless, you're going to incur a 10% penalty on the earnings portion, plus your regular income tax on the capital gains, right? Your regular levels. So it'd be like regular capital gains plus a 10% burden to you if you dip into that Roth IRA early. And then So Ben, keep going. I'm sorry, Jared, keep going.
Right. So I don't have anything else as far as why Bitcoin. I think you maybe could make a few more cases, but if you're someone who's just getting into this and you're wondering, hey, where should I go? What should I think about? I think those are sort of the big 3, call them 4 reasons why you might want to own the thing itself instead of doing something else, instead of going the ETF route. And before we go there, we've already sort of said this isn't investment advice. There are also people who will tell you only do this and only do that. And frankly, I think the whole point of Bitcoin is you can do whatever you want, right? And so it's kind of up to you, right? And so what we're trying to do is just give you this sort of paint the picture of why you might choose one or the other. But ultimately, hey, you got to do your own research. You got to make the decision yourself. But at the same time, we want you to be educated as you do that and not just kind of do it willy-nilly. So,
and I'd add to that this. Suddenly this conversation reminds me of being a married guy with kids already, and you're talking to newlyweds thinking about maybe having their first kid. And you see their eyes bug out, not only over the thought of a single child, but over actually seeing your family, which is to say multiple children. And there have been times when I've slowed young people down. I said, oh, no. Remember, generally speaking, the Lord gives them one at a time. Most of the time, children come one at a time, and by the grace of God, right? Because Jared, if somebody had handed you 3 kids all at once, or Megan and I 4 kids, or Selena and Ben 2 kids, it'd be overwhelming. And I'm sorry, some listener can chime in and be like, we had quadruplets right out the gate. And I'd be like, yes, you're the outlier. Like I said, the Lord normally gives them one at a time. Along with that, I would say this is a more advanced conversation, because as this ecosystem grows, you have more and more ways to gain, I'll call it this, exposure to Bitcoin. I think the final recommendation, if I could move my friends, it'd be like, try one, pick one, start with one, right? And I would most likely, if they said, come on, David, tell me which one to do, and you just gave it to us as well, Jared. I'm just kind of cozying up to your answer as well. I'd say, the easiest, most straightforward way to get your dollars into Bitcoin is on an exchange, buy the digital bearer asset. We're not even talking the self-custody part there. That'd be maybe your next step with that accumulated stack of Bitcoin. Do I want to take that into self-custody so that I'm assuming the risk as opposed to entrusting somebody else with the risk, right? That's a little bit more advanced with that one thing. But if you were to do that, I think that drives education and then opens up to more of these. Now, that said, there's other people who are really well advanced in being personal investors. And so if I know people who have been kind of as maybe more than a hobby horse, maybe that's not kind of honoring enough for what it is, but kind of an avocation on top of their normal vocations, have really taken saving and investing seriously. these types of folks are typically going to be more advanced in their thinking about precisely what we're talking about, which is how can I minimize my taxes down the line. I think we've said it before. Tax evasion is a felony, but tax avoidance is the American way, right? You don't want to pay the government any more than you're legally obliged to. And there's ways that you can minimize that. So for the person who's maybe more familiar with that world, they might actually kind of skip step one and really kind of consider these other instruments. ETFs is what you put before us today, exchange traded funds. And by the way, we didn't really talk about that. An exchange traded fund, their start price might be something like this. For 1 unit of an exchange traded fund, it might be $100. Well, in terms of units, I can think of spending $100 more than I can. Hey, Jared, what's the cost of 1 Bitcoin today? And you tell me it's $106,000. And I say, I've never been able to afford that. I never will be. And then people like us say, oh, you don't have to buy a whole Bitcoin. You can buy a portion of a Bitcoin. But still, there's this sort of unit bias. There's this shock and awe with the price right now. So that's another reason why the ETFs are helpful to some people, because it is proportional to that $100. You have the right amount of Bitcoin built into that, right? For today's purchase price. And that unit then will grow and contract based on what's happening with Bitcoin in the market, based on its pricing in US dollars. But the ETFs, for some people, are like, I can conceive of getting 5 of those Fidelity ETFs for Bitcoin. I can conceive of that and slowly stacking up. Plus, Jared, Ben, and David, I just don't see myself as ever having a cold wallet, right? Pulling stuff off exchanges. That's beyond me and my comfort, both now and in the future. Yeah, an ETF might be for you. And then again, to go further, an ETF could be inside of an IRA or a Roth IRA. So now you've got further tax advantage. And it won't surprise this person then, to kind of keep wrapping this up, that for having all of that convenience, having somebody else custody it for me, yes, there's going to be fees involved. This type of investor typically knows this, accepts this, and is good with this. I suppose we'd probably say the good news there is that the top side of Bitcoin, the growth of Bitcoin, certainly will continue to outstrip those fees. And there's a lot of good news there, a lot of good news.
So David's hit on sort of the first couple big ones. Why might you hold an ETF? Well, if you're Grandma Schmidt and you have no idea what a hardware wallet is and that word scares you, well, this is really easy, right? Because I can ask my investment advisor, my guy that I talk to once a year, hey, my grandson told me I should buy some of this Bitcoin thing. Can you buy some for me? And he can say, sure, assuming you're at least one of the brokerage firms that allows you to. I can do that for you. And Grandma doesn't have to take custody of it. All she needs to do is make sure her advisor knows to buy it. So simplicity's sake, right? And some people, I think, are going to find comfort in knowing that someone else is taking care of it. It's sort of that irony of how some of us like that idea of having more responsibility. Other people would say, I'd rather not. I have enough responsibility in my life. I don't need to add to that sort of thing. I don't trust myself in that way. And so I'm going to trust someone else to do this for me. And then again, the sort of tax part. So instead of having to set up in a completely different IRA with a different company like Ben does, Fidelity, Schwab, I have a Roth at Robinhood, they allow you to invest in these Bitcoin ETF funds on their app in their program, so that then you don't have to necessarily buy Bitcoin and set up a separate thing. So then David sort of led us into the fee part. And this might be, I would say, another reason why you might want to custody this with an ETF or buy with an ETF instead of holding it yourself. Because if you're trying to do tax avoidance, you're going to have it in some sort of IRA, whether it's a 401k, a Roth. You got to store it somewhere. You can't just buy it. And so on an ETF, when these ETFs came out, there was what some people called a fee war. And so basically this is what you think would be a free open market at its best. Companies competing to win your consumer, right? To win your Bitcoin ETF purchaser. And so what did they do? Well, they drove the fees as low as they possibly could. And what that means is that we're going to use an example of $10,000. This is just what I use. So if you bought $10,000 in IBIT, which is BlackRock's ETF, their current fee expense ratio is 0.12%. So it's super low. That means that over the course of a year, that ETF will have charged you by selling the collective assets at $12 for a year at $10,000. Let's play this out a little bit more, and don't be impressed. This is not my math. This is Claude AI math here. I'm not that good. But if you did this for 10 years, let's assume Bitcoin goes up 10% annually. That's a pretty low annual growth rate for Bitcoin, but let's just play with that number. In 10 years, with that 0.12% fee, it will have grown to $25,580. Now, if you would have bought that $10,000 yourself and held it yourself, it would be $25,937. Now, I bet you if I don't tell you what the difference is, you're going to say, that sounds like basically the same. And you're right. It basically is. So the only difference you would lose over 10 years is $357 to fees. $357 over 10 years for the simplicity, for the ease of not having to custody your Bitcoin yourself as you trust someone else. Yes, there's trust involved there, as opposed to talking about how much you pay for a Bitcoin IRA. So, Ben, would you be willing to share how much you pay per year for yours?
Yep. So Unchained is very clear. It's a company, it's a tech company that is kind of built on top of a regular bank. And for all of their platform, the app that they have to remind me that, yep, they have the asset, they charge me $250. Now, that does not come out of my investment. That's something that I pay out of my pocket, but it's $250 a year. So over 10 years, $2,500, that's a lot more than $357. And I'll give it to you there. That's definitely a savings. Now, I will continue to work with Unchained because frankly, I like the techie side of having devices and doing custody, but I'm so far down the Bitcoin rabbit hole that this is like a hobby for me, and I enjoy it, and learning more about it is exciting. But I can totally relate to somebody that would say that is way too much research and it's just cheaper. I'm going to go with this other ETF. And one other point while I have the floor that I'll make is that there have even been debates about doing away with capital gains tax on cryptocurrency or Bitcoin specifically. Now, I think we're a long way away from that, but that whole conversation, I mean, there are risks with every decision that you make, right? Taxes are almost certainly inevitable. The government will have to fund itself somehow. But I do think it's possible that at some point Bitcoin goes away from capital gains taxes. Well, then this whole conversation around buying Bitcoin through a Roth becomes completely worthless. So there's definitely risks all involved. My bet is that there will continue to be capital gains taxes. I think the government needs more of our money, not less, at the rate that they're spending it. And I'll do everything that I can to be tax avoidant. But I think the $357 fee speaks well for the ETF debate.
And I think there's one more thing about the ETFs too that isn't a reality today, but I think will be one day, and that's redemption of in-kind. So currently you cannot redeem your shares of BlackRock's IBIT for actual Bitcoin. So I could not go to them and say, hey, I've given you $10,000, now give me my Bitcoin. you can't do that. I don't think you can anyway. So I think there has been proposals submitted to the SEC to allow for in-kind redemption. So should that day come, if you go down this rabbit trail and you're like, hey, I've got this in BlackRock and I really want it myself, I would assume that one day you'll be able to go to BlackRock somehow and say, hey, I want my Bitcoin. And they'll say, okay, sure, whatever, here it is. And maybe you'll have to pay some fee, whatever. But that day might be coming down the future. I would assume would be there too. So even as you think about, hey, tax avoidance, do I want to own it myself? Am I locked in here forever? I don't necessarily think you're locked in one way or the other, that you could sort of do both as you desire, as you choose. So, David, anything you want to add to why an ETF?
Let me point out why also ETFs are really exciting, that people who are either in Bitcoin or leaning with an ear towards it, listening, thinking, considering why it's also been really important. It's not just for the personal investor, but really the big story on the ETFs is it opened up the ability for corporations to get exposure, which means invest in, even if slightly tangentially, this whole conversation we're having, into Bitcoin without changing a thing concerning their fiscal practices. And their fiscal practices are big things. It takes board meetings at publicly traded companies. It takes the decision of a majority of your shareholders, right? Or not just a majority, but weighted per how many shares they have then as well. But to change a juggernaut of a large organization to be able to invest in Bitcoin has proved too big for a variety of organizations. And particularly, I'm talking companies, whether particularly and publicly traded as well. But what ETFs did was, again, took Bitcoin and wrapped it in an asset class, a vehicle that already probably a majority of corporations had given the green check mark on for, hey, ETFs, we got to choose the right ones, of course. But when it comes to investing in the ETFs, we give our CFO and any financial board the right to give into any instrument. Maybe I'm just giving hypotheticals here, up to said percentage. Well, suddenly, without having to call a board meeting, or maybe probably more likely without having to go to shareholders, the corporation is able to get exposure to Bitcoin. So now we're not talking David Rufner, pennies, and Ben Haupt and Jared Townley. We're talking about corporations, oftentimes huge treasure troves of cash. And guess what, friends? Corporations might even be more in tuned to what's happening to their cash than average citizens like us, right? They've got all day to think about it. That is the job of somebody at the corporation or a whole group of people there. Whereas we think about our finances not all the time, right? And what they're doing, they're a good barometer maybe for us individuals of what do they think is happening to cash reserves? Is it a good idea to have cash reserves? And some of that language we've used before, we borrowed it from Michael Saylor at MicroStrategy, is that cash on hand is a melting ice cube. That inflation very actively diminishes the purchasing power of that cash. So I've got to find something to buy with my cash or to exchange for my cash that is growing at a faster rate than inflation is wanting to shrink the cash. And if corporations are jumping into these ETFs, that maybe is signal then for the individual investor that they might want to pay attention. And so there's a way in which I think all of us, our bias is largely away from ETFs and towards the digital bearer asset, whether in a private wallet or on Unchained as wrapped into a Roth IRA or traditional IRA, maybe even that'd be our preference. But that doesn't mean, but we're paying attention to these ETFs because particularly the big corporations are aping into it right now at a tremendous, tremendous level.
So today, I think it was today, River just released in a new report, the American Bitcoin Advantage, how Americans came to own 40% of all Bitcoin. And in this report, they reference Bitcoins and not Bitcoins, that's a different debate. They reference ETFs and institutions and how much they hold. So according to Rivers' report, $31 billion is the amount that Bitcoin ETF holdings are held by United States institutional investors. And 79.2% of global Bitcoin ETF holdings are held by American firms. And so just listen to some of the names of these companies that have Bitcoin or Bitcoin ETFs. So ones that I recognize, hedge fund, Citadel hedge fund, right? A giant hedge fund in the States holds that. Cambridge Associates, RIA, Mass Mutual Insurance, Northwestern Mutual Insurance, the Michigan Office of Retirement Services Pension Fund, the Harvard Endowment, Brown Endowment, MIT Endowment, Yale, and Stanford Endowments. All of these are big, what I would say, are big names that have bought and hold a Bitcoin ETF or Bitcoin itself as an institution. And just like David said, it's much easier for a company, for a CFO to go and buy an ETF than it is to then go get board and shareholder approval to buy Bitcoin, the asset itself. And so that's why some people have talked about Bitcoin ETFs as being the sort of launching pad into future institutional adoption, right? That companies now can do this, and it's not going to take them 10 years to finally get people's approval because it's in an ETF. They have approval to already go and buy that and already go and hold that with other things that they do. So I would say that that's sort of the last that I have for why an ETF versus why a hold Bitcoin yourself. So I'll do a similar thing to what David said. Hey, Jared, what would you want me to do? And I think I would say similar to you, if you want to learn about Bitcoin itself and you really want to experience the technology, the network, what it is, then you need to buy Bitcoin, the bear asset. There's no way around it. If you do that, then you'll have to learn. You'll sort of be forced to do that. But if you're really only in this for the financial gains, if you're really in this only for number go up, if you really are only here to diversify your portfolio, you're not interested in all those sort of things, then at least my conscience is at rest enough to say you can probably buy an ETF and you're going to be all right. That is the easiest way in. And now, do I want you to keep learning? Absolutely. But just get off zero is what we usually say, right? So do something. Whether it's both, maybe just to see how they both are, but that would be my sort of closing recommendation, my closing remarks, how I answered Brian to bring this conversation full circle here today. So any closing words, gentlemen?
I love it. I would just echo that. All of us took a dive into Bitcoin in some way, and we'd probably look back on the way we dove in and some of the things that we were doing around that first dive and say, yeah, we probably wouldn't do that because like I bought Bitcoin and some Ethereum and some Cosmos and all these other coins. Bad investments. Bitcoin turned out to be a great investment. All of investing is a bit of a gamble. Do your own research, try something, learn a little bit, and then try something else. It's part of the fun. It's part of the game. And then talk to other people about it. It's part of building a community and hopefully part of taking care of your family and being good steward of the assets that God has given you. So great episode today. Thanks, Jared, for introducing the topic for us. And hey, we hope to join you again down the road. We have some guests coming up that we're excited about, and we'll continue to cover all sorts of topics. Let us know. Reach out to us on Facebook or X and let us know if you have a topic that you'd like to talk about. We'd love to maybe even have you on the show if you're interested. So with that, we'll see you the next time.